I think we'll get started. Good morning. Welcome to Be a Mensch. This is installment number 19. And we know this because today we are beginning a new chapter of Pirkei Avot, a new Perek Bet, or chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot of Ethics of Our Fathers. So the first one had 18 Mishnahs, and we've kind of been averaging. I don't think it's just averaging. I think we've pretty much stuck to it. Oh, your finger is stuck? Okay, careful. Oh, that hurts. That hurts. You got your finger stuck. Should I like that? No. Okay. So we've kind of been doing one chapter per week. So if we did the first 18 chapters, it means this is the 19th installment. We started at the beginning of this year. So welcome to chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot. And as always, for those of you that have been with us in the past, we're going chronologically, and we are now holding Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Before we get started, I would like to mention that this morning's class is sponsored by Mrs. Shannon Sussman. Shannon, is it in honor of somebody specific?
No. But
okay.
now I feel like it should be.
That's okay. How about we make it in honor of all those in need of a speedy recovery? I feel like in this time, we should really do as much as we can. My brother-in-law in the Valley has a grandmother who was in her 90s, who passed away, I think yesterday on Shabbos. I think she passed away. And I don't know that it was from coronavirus, but one of the saddest things about it is that they're actually not doing the funeral today. They're doing the funeral tomorrow. And that's because Shomrei Hadass, which is one of the leading funeral homes in New York, said that they cannot handle the sheer amount of funerals. They're actually asking for volunteers to help transport the bodies. It's really in Yiddish we call it a himmelgeschrei, a cry to heaven. It's schrecklich. It's terrible what's going on in the world. And we must stay home. We must stay safe, of course. But we must also continue to say our tehillim and to beg mercy from heaven for anybody that's not feeling well. And for all those that are feeling well, that they shouldn't get the virus. If they get the virus, they should get it in a mild way, etc. So we'll start off by saying a couple of names. So Shannon, if you don't mind, we'll do the class today. Today's learning will be in honor of all those in need of a speedy recovery. We'll start with my dad, who I do have an update for. Baron, if you can please update Pam, because I know she's always asking me for updates, and I always feel bad if I don't have something to update, because he was pretty stable for a little while. But on Friday, right before Shabbos, they moved him down to a lower level. And I think today they even lowered the amount of oxygen. He's Baruch Hashem starting to breathe more and more on his own. They're starting to see, there's like these markers that they see how much of the virus is still left. I don't know exactly how that works, but apparently the numbers are going down, and they're hoping they'll be able to send him home. They just want to monitor his oxygen level over the next 2 days. So please keep up your prayers. I know that many of you have had him in mind. His name is Yosef Yitzchak Ben Rezel. He's in the hospital, and hopefully we'll have him home real soon. Also, let's have in mind a couple of other relatives of mine, of Gitti's, and a couple other people which we'll mention. So Gitti has an uncle. His name is Avraham Pesach Ben Esther Leah. May he have a speedy recovery in all of his in all of his facets, and be able to go home speedily. She has a cousin whose name is David Ben Shoshana. Another uncle from the other side, his name is Peretz Ben Bela. These are all people that I mentioned that are either in the hospital or were in the hospital and now home recovering. One of them is even in the ICU. I also want to mention Rabbi Tzvi Bayarski, whose name Leah is Tzvi Hirsch Ben.
Tzvi Hirsch Ben Chava Shoshana.
And Chava Shoshana, he's actually Leah's boss. He's one of the heads of the Aleph Institute. He actually lives here in Los Angeles. His name is Tzvi Bayarski. He's only 37 years old, 38? 37 years old. It's very, very sad.
In the hospital.
And it's really very terrible what's going on all around the world, and we should have in mind all of them. And if anybody has any other names that you know of that we should keep in mind during our learning for a speedy recovery, please mention them now.
I would also say good news that Rabbi Lipsker, who's the founder and chairman of Aleph, is Baruch Hashem home, recovering very well. He's 74, so it's good news, and he surely continues to get better. Shalom.
Amen. Amen. Thank God. That's very good news. It's very, very good news. And he's even older. He's in the 70s.
And he's had serious heart surgeries.
Okay. So without further ado, let's get started with the learning. So we're starting chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot. Oh, 1 second. One more announcement actually is that Rabbi Hanoka's davening, which many of you tuned in for at 9:30. Menachem, do you want to play with Kathy's phone? Yeah. Okay, but then you can't sit on top of that. Can you sit on the ankle and eat your bamba? You want a video? I apologize. I'm just going to give him something to entertain him. Hopefully this will work. You want I'm a chassid? Okay. He wants I'm a chassid. He has preferences now about his videos. How terrible is that? I promise you we only do this in emergency situations. Don't judge me.
Definitely not doing that.
Okay, Menachem, so you said on this bank call? Kathy's going to give this class, okay? Okay, so back to where we were. So we're beginning chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot, and historically where we are, we've arrived at a very interesting place. And possibly this is why chapters 2 starts here. I didn't see that written anywhere, but it's just a thought I had. We are holding Rebbe. You see that today's class starts with Rabbi Omer, which means Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, many of you may recognize as the author or compiler of the Mishnah. In other words, the Mishnah which we're learning now, that's what we learn each week on Sunday mornings, or Pirkei Avot, which is a section of the Mishnah, is compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. It's the first time that the oral law was ever written down. Big story how that ended up happening. We won't get into it too much today. Rabbi Yehuda is the son of Rabbi his father's name was either Rabbi Gamliel or Rabbi Shimon. In other words, many of you may remember that we mentioned that from Hillel Hazakin, Hillel the elder, the succession of who the Nasi was father to son for about 7 generations, with Rabbi Shimon, then his son Rabbi Gamliel, then his son Rabbi Shimon, then his son Rabbi Gamliel, etc. That culminated with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was the son of, I think his father's name was Rabbi Gamliel, I don't remember. Most often in the Mishnah, he is referred to as Rebbe, or our master, or our teacher, and that's because he is the author of the Mishnah. So without further ado, let's see what he has to tell us. Let's read the whole Mishnah, then we'll take some time to analyze it. So Richard, if you can get us started with reading the Mishnah.
Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, which is the proper path in life that a person should choose for himself? Any path that is honorable and beneficial for himself as well as to other people. Be careful what seems to be an unimportant mitzvah, just as one that seems very important, because you do not know what reward is given for each of the mitzvahs, or how important each one of them is to Hashem. Compare the expense or loss of money that a mitzvah might cause to the reward that you will receive for doing it, and compare the temporary physical gain from Avera with the loss that will bring about.
Okay, let's take this one section at a time, shall we? I want to start with the opening paragraph, obviously. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, which is the proper path in life that a person should choose for himself? I want to challenge, with all due respect, I want to challenge first Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's question. Or challenge is the wrong word, and that's why it shouldn't be with all due respect. I want to struggle to understand, oh, welcome Arnold, I didn't see you had joined us. I want to struggle to understand Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's question. Shouldn't the answer to which is the proper path a person should choose for himself be obvious, especially in the Mishnah, right? Shouldn't it be the way of the Torah, the way of mitzvot? Shouldn't that be like the obvious, which is the proper path, the path of Torah and mitzvot? Isn't that what, as a rabbi, I should be preaching every day? Shouldn't this class end right here? Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi starts off the second chapter, and he says, which is the proper way for a person to choose? And he says, way of the Torah. Great, perfect. Easier said than done, but spend the rest of your life trying to do that, right? Shouldn't that be the whole thing? So the Rambam, Maimonides, explains that what he's referring to, and this question leads us to a very, very good, like a very, very insightful point, which is, yes, it's true that we should always be following the Torah. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi looks at that as obvious. If someone is reading the Mishnah, obviously we're talking about you should follow the way of the Torah. The question is, once you're following the Torah, hold on, the video disappeared apparently somehow. Oh, there was an ad, you clicked the ad. Okay, here you go. Once you're following the Torah, the question is, what is the correct path? And what do we mean by that? Often in life, we see many people around us, and we are tempted to follow one or the other. What do I mean by that? You sometimes see someone who seems very extreme. You see someone who's a huge Baal tzedakah. He gives a tremendous amount of tzedakah, right? So you say to yourself, you wake up the next morning, you say, I'm going to learn from this fellow. I'm going to give away all my money to tzedakah. But because you want to follow it all the way, so you say to yourself, tzedakah is a great thing, so I'm going to give all of my money to tzedakah, and I'm literally going to live off meager portions, etc. That night you come home, who has it out with you? Your spouse. Your spouse, she's like, or he's like, this wasn't such a great idea. I'm not so in the mood of living meagerly. Or maybe if you're not married, it's even yourself. You're like, is this really what the Torah wants? The Torah wants that I should be giving all of my money to tzedakah and I should be living like a poor man. This can't be true, right? So then you say to yourself, you know what? The Torah says I have to make my wife happy. Or the Torah says that I have to live properly. It says, v'chayba have the mitzvot are only given in order for us to live by them. So then certainly I shouldn't be, certainly I shouldn't be, living off bread and salt. I should be able to have something. So you say to yourself, okay, so I'm going to keep all my money for myself. I'm not going to give it to tzedakah. And obviously we all know that neither of these is the correct approach. There's somewhere in the middle, there's somewhere along the way that is the correct approach. And that is one of the points that the Rambam explains, the Maimonides explains, that Rebbe is telling us here in these opening lines of the Mishnah. Give me just a show of hands if you've studied the Rambam Maimonides, his opening couple of chapters of his book, Mishnah Torah, particularly the one on Hilchot Deot, which is the laws of characteristics. Anybody? I know, Baron, I know you and I have done this together. We did this, you and Pam together. The Rambam has a full chapter, a full section, which has multiple chapters, called Hilchot Deot, which means the laws of characteristics, like the character of man. How to be, welcome Shlomo. Welcome, thank you for joining us. And what he does there essentially is he says like this. He says, a person should never be too greedy nor too stingy. You got to find that healthy balance. A person should never be too lustful, but also not too reserved that he can't even be together with his wife. A person shouldn't be, and he goes through all of these different things. You know what I mean? A person shouldn't eat too much, also shouldn't eat too little. A person shouldn't sleep too much, also shouldn't sleep too little. And he literally talks about he lists probably 30, 40. Baron, you remember this? He lists like 30 or 40 different, things that many people struggle over with their lives. And he says, you should, says the Rambam, and that's why he's translating this into Rabbi's words here. Perhaps he learned it from Rabbi here. A person should always find the middle road, the middle path. The Rambam gives two exceptions to the rule there. And of course, throughout the Torah, we find there are certain things in life that obviously we don't take the middle path. The Rambam's two exceptions are anger and gaiva, which means haughtiness. He says those two things a person should stick away from like fire. Anyways, this is actually similar to what we learn in Talmud Yerushalmi. As many of you know, the regular Talmud, which we always refer to as the Babylonian Talmud, there's also the Jerusalem Talmud. In Talmud Yerushalmi, there is a quote which reads, and I quote for you in English, because I got the translation here. The Torah is compared to two paths, one of fire and one of ice. If one strays too close to the fire, he will be burnt. If one stays too close to the ice, strays. I apologize, I read that as stays. If one strays too close to the ice, he will freeze. One should therefore maintain a middle course. So based on these two, Rebbe and this, meaning Rebbe here in our Mishnah, and this Talmud Yerushalmi, the Rambam advises us that in general in life, it's good to find a healthy medium. I'll never forget that Gitti and I, when we were dating, this is one of the major things you discuss. You always hear about these different people, these different paths in life, and one of the main things is the struggle. How do you find that healthy medium? And I'm not saying it's easy to always find the healthy medium, but certainly that is our task as Jews. So let's read this again. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, which is the proper path in life a person should choose for himself? In other words, in this case, he's asking, should I always be worried about myself, or should I be worried about others, right? Let's not even talk about money, by the way. I give the example of tzedakah. Let's just think about worry, right? Very often the question is worry, right? You're worried about other people. You have these people, there's a term for mothers, I think they call it, they sacrifice themselves. I forgot the term. There's a big movement in today's day and age that mothers shouldn't always be sacrificing themselves to their children. You have to have specific moments in your week, not at the expense of your children. Certain moments in your week, in your day, etc., where you take some time for yourself. And obviously, if somebody takes too much time for themselves, it's also no good. Says Rabbi, and from here starts this wisdom as it goes throughout Mishnah Torah, from the Rambam, from Maimonides, and the Talmud Yerushalmi, etc. Any path that is honorable and beneficial for himself, as well as to other people. Find something where there's a healthy path, there's a healthy medium between the two. All right, so that is number one. Number two, the second section of the Mishnah says, let's talk about mitzvahs for a second, right? Again, we know, okay, so you're following the path of the Torah mitzvahs. You're going to try to find a healthy medium. But very often we find that mitzvahs, in our mind, we like to judge mitzvahs, right? I have X amount of money. Should I give tzedakah, or should I buy myself a pair of tefillin that I can put on every day? There's all sorts of questions like that get very gray area because, again, nothing is black and white, right? Nothing is fire and ice. Oh, your video disappeared again? Let me find it. One second, Tati's gonna find it. You know what? You want to play that game? We'll play that game afterwards, okay? Because Tati's teaching a class now. Here, you hold this, Tati. So, in section 2, the question is, how do you know which mitzvah or which aveira is greater than the other? It reminds us, Rebbe, of something that we may have heard before, and probably was based on this Mishnah. You don't know. Never. You should always be careful about the smallest, tiny little mitzvah, like smiling to someone and giving them whatever it is, versus the biggest mitzvah in the world. Being the biggest philanthropist at the biggest dinner. To you, they should be equal. Mitzvahs have value not based on the way we perceive things in this physical world. They have value based on the reward we receive. They have value based on the punishment that there is. They have value based on all sorts of things, but it's not necessarily the way we view it with our eyes. So, Leah, if I can ask you to read for us, please, no small matter here from the Living Lessons.
When it is particularly hard to fulfill a specific mitzvah, the Yetzer Hara may try to discourage you and say, why work so hard to fulfill such a small mitzvah? The Mishnah tells us how to respond. Be as careful with the small mitzvah as with the major one. Each mitzvah you fulfill connects you to Hashem, especially when you have to work hard. Never underestimate the importance of a single mitzvah. The Rambam rules that one must view the entire world as balanced equally between good and bad. Just one good deed can tip the scales for good and bring about salvation for oneself and the entire world.
We find ourselves here with a little bit of, we're leaning towards Maimonides today, a lot of Rambam going on today. And this is a quote from Hilchot Teshuvah, the laws of Teshuvah from the Rambam, where he says that every time a person is faced with a choice, right, whether to do the right thing or the wrong thing, we're all faced with these choices almost every moment of every day. Excuse me. When you do so, when you're faced with that choice, you should always try to look in your mind as the whole world balanced on an equal scale. Look at the image on your screen, that type of scale, not the electronic one that shows you numbers. This kind of scale where things are weighted. And we should always do that. We should always, excuse me, we should always view the world as equally balanced. Why? Because if we do so, then we'll take our decision very seriously. What we're about to do here can have a tremendous effect on the entire world. I may either bring salvation for the entire world with this one decision, right, or the opposite. And obviously, I want to weigh things to the good. Right? So if you put all the good deeds of the world over the entire history, and all the bad deeds of the world in the entire history, on either side of the scale, if I do my one mitzvah, if I'm right now, my moment when I'm faced with the decision of good or bad, if I make sure to do the right one, then I weigh it to the correct side. And Maimonides reminds us, by the way, just to clarify, because some of you might be thinking, what does it mean? What is truly a small mitzvah? And we don't even know what a small mitzvah and a large mitzvah is. So what does it mean? Don't weigh a small mitzvah versus a large mitzvah. The way Maimonides takes this is as per their reward or their punishment. Very often in the Torah we see that this mitzvah it gets if you don't do it there's no punishment at all. This mitzvah, excuse me. This mitzvah, if you don't do it, then there's a fine. This mitzvah, if you don't do it, you get lashes. This mitzvah, if you don't do it, you get put to death, either by heaven or then by human beings, which is even worse, right? Because literally the death penalty. So the Rambam says that doesn't necessarily mean that it has any less intrinsic value to God. Why it has those punishments could be connected to something else, connected to your neshama or whatever. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the last line. So the last line was, Arnold, you want to remind us? Please read for us the last paragraph of our Mishnah. Compare.
Before we go to that, I have a question concerning the last statement that you made, or at least the idea, and that is ultimately what is it that we can state is the salvation of the world? When we do a mitzvah that is going to save the world, what does that mean? What is the salvation of the world?
That's a very, very, very good question. I don't know that I know the answer specifically that the Rambam was referring to, because to quote him, and I quote, maybe Yeshua v'atzala la'atzmai u'l'chol ha'olam kula. He brings salvation, Yeshua v'atzala, brings a redemption and salvation. I think that's probably the best translation. If anybody speaks Hebrew and wants to offer something else, I'm open to that. Redemption and salvation of the entire world. But I would posit that it means Mashiach.
Okay.
That's what I would say. We never know. We never know when we're holding them, when it's that last mitzvah that's going to tip the scales and bring Mashiach.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion. But I will not say that that's what the Rambam is specifically referring to. Maybe he's talking about something more, spiritual.
Esoteric. More, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so the last paragraph of the Mishnah was what? Compare the expenses.
Compare the expenses or losses of money that a mitzvah might cause to the reward that you will receive to doing it, for doing it, and compare the temporary physical gain from an avera with the loss that it will bring about.
So this section of the, sorry, I'm just going to try to get to the next page. There we go. So this section of the Mishnah seems to be telling us. Oh, by the way, they really answered it already in the English text, because they added in all these between the bold. But really, when you look at the text, it does seem to be contradicting the section before, because it says the having mechashiv, you should compare the loss of a mitzvah versus the reward, and the reward of an aveira, the reward of a transgression versus its loss. And immediately he makes clear, and I don't know which commentary this is that he's using, but he makes clear that we're talking about two different rewards and two different losses. We're talking about the loss that you get from a mitzvah monetarily or physically versus the reward you're going to get spiritually. He's saying, if we remember those things as we get ready to do a mitzvah, right? Very often, I just had this conversation last week with someone who I often put on tefillin with him, and I said, now I can't. It's time for you to buy your own pir. And we were talking about costs, whenever there's different types of tefillin, larger ones, smaller ones, etc. Because, you put tefillin every day. Hold on one second.
Were you talking to your son when you said that?
No. He puts on tefillin every day. I was just fixing his camera as I was doing so.
It was time to think outside the box.
What was that?
It was time to think outside the box.
Right here. He's right here. Anyways, and he was talking to me about the expense, because very often mitzvahs take a physical toll on us, and that physical toll can be financial, as is very often the case, but very often it can even just be literally strain, or in many other instances it's just time. Like, Rabbi, I'm too busy. I don't have time to come to Minyan. I don't have time to whatever it is. Shlomo asked if he bought his own tefillin. He hasn't bought his own tefillin yet, but I think he will. What happened? Oh, I'm sorry. Did it? Wait 1 second. Yeah.
We just have to give him time. That's all.
Who? To this man?
Yeah.
I think so. I think he will put on tefillin every day, and I think he'll buy his own pir. But I was reminded of this story as I'm reading this Mishnah this morning, and I'm preparing for this morning, because I was like, this is exactly what we mean. You're right. It can take a big physical toll on you. And maybe for some of us, it's not finances, but it could be time, it could be effort. It could just be that laziness, to schlep ourselves off the couch to do whatever it is. And if we can only compare to ourselves the infinite reward spiritual reward that is a mitzvah versus the small amount of physical loss that we might suffer, it's really not even comparable. It's not even, they don't even fall on the same page. And the same thing is the opposite. When we do an avera, when we transgress, right? When we're faced with a challenge to do something negative, and we do by mistake, whatever, right? Or sometimes not by mistake. If we can, in our minds, make this calculation of what am I really gaining now by doing this transgression? All right, I'm enjoying myself for a couple minutes. I got angry at this person, so it makes me feel good that I get to have the last word and I get to scream at them, whatever. But compare that versus the tremendous amount of reward that there would be if you just hold back. Just hold back for those 5-10 minutes, right? The tremendous reward that there is for holding, the spiritual reward that there is for not doing the transgression is infinitely greater. Anyways, we're running a little bit out of time here. I want to talk a little bit about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who he was. We spoke about him briefly, but let's talk about his life and times. Shlomo, can you read for us? You got to unmute yourself first. Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Now we hear you. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in the biography in the purple section.
Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, also known as Rebbe, a teacher, and Rabbeinu Hakadosh, was the son of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel from the last from the last Mishnah of the previous Perek. He was born on the day that Rabbi Akiva was murdered by the Romans.
I
Rebbe
believe it is. One second before you keep going. So first of all, here we have the name that I was looking for before. He was the son of Rabbi Shimon, who was the son of Rabbi Gamliel, who, like I told you, was the son of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Gamliel till Hillel HaZaken. The significance of the fact that he was born on the day that Rabbi Akiva was murdered by the Romans, you may remember that Rabbi Akiva was murdered.
They flayed his skin, no?
What?
They flayed his skin.
They flayed his skin. Yes, you may remember that he was tortured before he was burnt. I believe that in on Yom Kippur we read about him as one of the Asara Harugei Malchus, the 10 martyrs. But the significance of this, I believe, is mentioned by the Gemara, by the Talmud, in the following statement. It says, "V'zarach hashemesh uva hashemesh." It says, and the sun rose and the sun set. And Rashi and the commentaries over there explain that this is referring to this concept, that whenever Hashem is going to take a very holy person away from the world, or a very holy countenance or a very holy energy away from the world, before he does so, before he has the sun set, another sun rises. In other words, Yehuda Hanasi was born, and he ended up being one of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time. He was already born on the same day that Rabbi Akiva passed away, because the beginning had to, the next step had to start before the previous step could end. It actually reminds me of another statement in the Talmud, which is very relevant to today's times, which is the Talmud says, I'm trying to remember the exact Hebrew words, and I cannot remember it. I will look it up after this class, because this probably will not be my last time quoting it. The Talmud says that before God sends a disease down into the world, he sends the cure. The cure always precedes the disease. God would never send a disease into the world before making sure the cure exists somewhere in the world. It might not have been discovered yet. It might be still in someone's mind, in potential. It might even not be in somebody's mind, but it could be as like a spiritual concept. And then we just need somebody to tap into it and bring it down here. But to say that God sends a disease down into the world and it's completely uncurable is not a Jewish way of thinking in general. But specifically with regards to diseases and cures, the Talmud says this statement that God always sends the cure for the disease before he sends the actual disease. So it's hard as that is
appropriate for right now.
What?
That's very appropriate for today.
I said it's very appropriate for today. That's why I'm quoting it. I know it's a lot easier.
What does that mean? I don't get it, because
it means that the cure for coronavirus.
God sends diseases to the world.
Of course, God sends diseases to the world. Who else sends it?
So I don't get the quote. I didn't understand.
That before God sends a disease to the world, he always sends the cure first.
So God sends diseases.
Of course God sends diseases. Who else sends it? You think there's some other force besides for God that's controlling the world?
No, but I mean, it just seems kind of weird to say. That's all.
It does seem kind of weird to say. And our understanding of this is that it's the best thing for the world right now, as hard as that is to believe. But God does control the world. And as hard as that is to hear right now, we have to believe and trust in God that yes, the thousands and thousands of people that are dying across the world is God's decision. The opposite is considered heretical in Jewish belief. This is a very, very delicate topic, and I would never, if when I'm talking to someone who's suffering, it's one of the hardest things to say. You don't say that to someone, but it's the truth. We have to recognize that there is no other power in the world, and it's one of the things that should give us at least some consolation. You want to see the video? Oh, I'm sorry, your video disappeared. But it's very important for us to be reminded. There's nothing else that controls this world besides for God. And as hard as it is for us to understand why this happened, God has a plan of some sort. And it's not our business, by the way, to try to understand that plan. But much more importantly, it's not our business to try to justify that plan. Just because God has a plan doesn't mean we can't change it. When we do mitzvahs, when we beg Hashem, when we demand of Hashem to bring Mashiach, even if he wasn't planning to bring it, very often in the Gemara, we learn about the fact that we can alter God's plan for the good and for the worse. And I realize that presents a philosophical dilemma. We could talk about that one day. But for now, let's leave that aside. Let's talk about the emotional part of it. We should realize that even though this is God's plan and it's maybe the best thing that's supposed to happen to the world right now, if we want to change that, we can change that. By davening to Hashem, by doing teshuvah, by begging for Mashiach, by doing things to hasten Mashiach's coming, we can change that and actually bring about the Geula. The Rebbe would always remind people of this with the Holocaust, for instance. While on the one hand, we always believe and we have to know very, very clearly that it comes from God, because to say that it came from somewhere else, some other force, is heretical in Jewish belief. But at the same time, we can't accept it. We can't accept it. We have to say, Hashem, we don't give you any excuse why this could have happened. I don't care what your plan was. We're not taking it. We're not buying it. And we can say the same thing in today's day and age. But at the same time, we should know with complete faith. And this is, by the way, I don't mean to just plug my next class, but tomorrow night we're starting our study of Chovas HaLevavos, the duties of the heart. This is one of the things we're going to talk about, suffering and tragedy, and how that goes. And it was spoken about last Thursday by Rabbi Hanoka, for those of you that were here in his class, Peering Through Pain, this past Thursday. But it's a very hard topic to swallow, and it's definitely something that is easier for me as a rabbi to say than to actually feel. But we have to spend our time thinking and recognizing this, meditating on this, and because that's part of our challenge. That's part of our calling right now in this moment.
Isn't that part of the intent of bringing these things on?
I don't know if I would go so far. I would stop short of giving any reason for why God brings something like this to the world, and I would say that's not our business, and we have to tell him, you have no excuse. Okay, take it away. Your children are suffering. Take it away from this world. Okay, that's my personal view. Whatever, everybody can do whatever they want. Anyways, but Shlomo, finish off for us about Rebbe. So he was born the same day that Rabbi Akiva passed away. Rebbe lived a long life
and served as Nasi for many years. Rebbe is most famous for compiling the Mishnah. He realized that people were forgetting Torah Shel B'Peh, so he brought all the Chachamim together to resolve disputes and record all the halachos in a single system. He finished compiling the Mishnah in the year 3948, 120 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Before his passing, Rebbe assured his family that he would return home every Friday night and ask them to prepare the candles, table, and his bed as before. So it was. Even after his passing, Rebbe came home each week to make kiddush for his family. This continued until it happened that a neighbor was visiting and bore witness to the amazing scene. After that, Rebbe did not return, out of concern for the other tzaddikim who did not share the privilege of returning to their homes after their passing. Shouldn't seem less righteous. So that he didn't do it, so he didn't seem more righteous than others.
Right. In other words, he wanted to do it out of respect for others. I mean, when it was just his family, it was okay, but for others, it wasn't. By the way, this is one of the reasons why, because by Rebbe it happened on a physical level, but we really know that this happens to a tzaddik, to someone who actually lived his entire life in a spiritual, meaning where spirituality was the main thing in his life, where Torah and mitzvahs was the main thing in his life, and his physical matter was clearly secondary to that. It was clearly just a mechanism to interact with the world. We've always known that therefore, after they pass away, they actually are more present in this world than less. This is also one of the reasons why by the Rebbe, they continue to set up the Rebbe's cheer every day in 770 for davening every single day. They set up the chair sits there, etc. And many people are like, oh, what is this, a museum? And the answer is no. The answer is just like Rebbe, who by Rebbe they saw it on a physical level, but we know that the Rebbe is coming spiritually in a ruchnistic way. The Rebbe's presence is felt, just like we know when we go to the Ohel, to the Rebbe's gravesite, you feel the Rebbe's presence more. When you go to 770, when you go to the Rebbe's shul, we feel the Rebbe's presence more, and that's why they continue to set it up. We'll cut today's class short. Not cut it short, but I'm saying we'll end it here. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, let's move on with that. But just to review the Mishnah, so number one, Rebbe asks us, what is the correct path? Do we worry more about ourselves or do we worry more about others? And Rebbe says, you have to find a middle ground. Then he continues to say, but even though you're finding a middle ground, this doesn't mean that you start to judge mitzvahs against each other. Mitzvahs all have an intrinsic value and an importance to Hashem, that your neshama is connected to Hashem way beyond anything you could possibly imagine. So don't think that one mitzvah is more important than another. And he finishes off by saying, when it comes to what you gain and what you don't gain, you're weighing pros and cons of mitzvahs and transgressions. Regardless of what you think there's a lot more to the picture. The physical reward, the physical gain, or the physical loss is not always the end of the picture. There's a spiritual gain and a spiritual loss, which may be way beyond that. This was all said by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the leader of his time and the author or compiler, let's call him, of the Mishnah. Thank you all for joining us. Any questions? All right. So thank you very much to Shannon for sponsoring today's class. And we'll see you all either tomorrow at 7 p.m. For the beginning of our study. It's going to be a textual study of a book called Chovas HaLevavos. I'll put the text on the screen as usual. Chovas HaLevavos means duties of the heart. It was written by an 11th century scholar known as Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda. We're going to be learning particularly Shar HaBitachon, the gateway of faith, which the Rebbe would always encourage people to study when they lack faith or when they're looking for more trust in Hashem. So please join us for that. If not, I will see you all next week. Same time, same place, same bagels. The bagels in your house, whatever you have at home. That's what you